everybody. Hope you've had a great week. Last week we started a series of lessons about children in the Bible, and we're going to continue that this week. Last week we talked about Jesus as a child, and we focused on some of the stories that we know in the Bible about Jesus when he was a little boy. And in all the lessons we're going to talk about, we'll hear about what we know in the Bible about this Bible character as a child, and then in each case, how God used them all in important ways when they grew up, when they were adults. Today's story is about some sheep and some camels and a beautiful coat. Maybe wasn't probably like this, but someone at church made this, and it is a very beautiful coat. Or maybe the coat was like this, really fancy, lots of colors and bright and beautiful. And we're going to learn about the character in the Bible named Joseph. Now, when I was a little girl, I used to get these Josephs mixed up. Joseph in the Old Testament with the beautiful coat is different from the Joseph in the New Testament where we see as that was married to Mary and was part of the Christmas story. This is a different Joseph. He lived many, many years before Mary and Joseph. Joseph was a child of Jacob and Rachel, and probably grew up and maybe lived in a tent or a dwelling kind of like that. His father was Jacob. I'm going to tell the story up here on this board and put different figures up. Jacob was very wealthy and was an important leader of God's people. Well, Jacob had 10 sons, and this is the oldest one. His name was Reuben. And they were from his first wife, and then he had 2 sons, Joseph, and then Benjamin was the youngest. So there were 12 boys. There were also some sisters in the family, but these 2 were his youngest. And it says in the Bible that Joseph was Jacob's favorite son. We don't know exactly why he was the favorite, but he was the favorite of Jacob, his father. Well, what his brothers did a lot of the times was take care of the sheep. That was one of their jobs, and Joseph would help his brothers take care of the sheep. And they had a lot to do to make sure the sheep had enough food to eat, enough grass to eat. Well, one day, Jacob, because he was the favorite son, Jacob gave Joseph a beautiful coat. And it says that it was a beautiful coat with many colors and patterns, and he was really proud of that coat. But the brothers here didn't have a coat like that, and they were very jealous. And Joseph may not have realized how the brothers didn't like him. It says in the Bible they hated him. That's a pretty strong way to feel about a brother. But they were very, very jealous and threatened by Joseph. Well, one night Joseph went to sleep and he had a dream. And it says that he went and told his brothers about the dream. And it says that he dreamed that they were putting the sheaves of wheat together, bundles of wheat, and Joseph's bundle suddenly stood up, and the other 11 bundles bowed down before his. He told his brothers about that dream. They did not like hearing about that. And he had another dream where the sun and the moon and 11 stars bowed down before him. He went and told his brothers, and the brothers got even madder at him. They did not like this idea of bowing before Joseph. So one day, the 11 brothers, took the sheep far away from home to take care of them. So all the brothers were gone except for Joseph and Benjamin, who stayed at home. So Jacob said after a while he wanted to check on them, make sure that everything was okay. So he sent Joseph to check on them. He probably sent some food and supplies. And so Jacob goes over to his brothers, and they said, "Here comes the dreamer." And so they decided they were going to kill him. But the oldest brother Reuben said, "Let's don't kill him. That seems awfully mean. Let's don't do that." So they, you know what they did? They threw Joseph in a pit, in a big hole in the ground. They took off the robe first of all, and then they threw Joseph down in that pit. And they were just gonna. Reuben was gonna go rescue him in a little bit, but they went off. But you know what? Joseph knew that God was with him when he went into the pit. So here he is, and he's down there in the pit. And in a little while, some travelers came along, and that's where the camel part of our story comes along. And those brothers, instead of killing Joseph, they sold him for 20 pieces of silver. But you know what? God was with him as he went off with the travelers. And there's Joseph going along with the travelers, and they were going to Egypt. And they took him to a land far away from home and sold him to another man as a slave to work for him. But you know what? God was with Joseph as he became a slave. Well, in the meantime, the brothers killed an animal and took Joseph's robe and put blood on it and took it back to Jacob and said, "Look what we found." And Jacob was so sad because it sure did look like Joseph had been killed by an animal. But they told him a big lie. That's not what happened. And Jacob was very, very sad. Well, as Joseph went down to Egypt, he became an important person in Pharaoh's kingdom. Pharaoh was the king. And eventually, Joseph became second in command to the Pharaoh. And that's an important part of the story when Joseph grows up to be a grown-up. Well, we know a lot about what happened to Joseph from Genesis, the book of Genesis in the Bible. We know when he went to Egypt, he was a slave. He was thrown into prison. He was mistreated. But while he was in prison, he interpreted dreams. Some of the people had dreams, and he told what those dreams meant, and it came true. And he appeared before the Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, and he became very important to Pharaoh in Egypt. He helped to save the land of Egypt from a famine, which means when they didn't have any food or any crops. And then he ended up saving his family's life because they came to Egypt to buy grain. His brothers did eventually bow down to him, as his dreams said when he was a young boy, and he forgave his brothers for that terrible thing they did. He was years and years away from his family. But God was with Joseph through all of those things, through all the disappointments and heartache, when he was separated from his family, when he had to live with strangers, when he got thrown into prison unfairly, when he lived in a foreign country, when he missed his family and his homeland. He didn't know what had happened to his father or his brothers. And God was with him when he forgave his brothers for the terrible things he'd done to him. We do see pictures of Joseph as a child, as a young man, and then we see him grow into an adult and be used by God for such a wonderful thing to save his people, to save God's people. In Genesis 50, it says, "His brothers then came and threw themselves down before him. 'We are your slaves,' they said. But Joseph said to them, 'Don't be afraid. Am I in the place of God? You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. So then, don't be afraid. I will provide for you and your children.' And he reassured them and spoke kindly to them." Amen.